Complexity exposes how organizations actually operate. As growth and pressure increase, the challenge is no longer strategy, but it is about sustaining execution, accountability, and leadership consistency across the business. This is Operating Discipline with Terry Wilson, conversations with CEOs and senior leaders about organizational performance under pressure. Our conversation today is with Ron Henry. He is the Chief Succession Officer with Ministry Transitions. Welcome, Ron. How are you?
I'm doing great today, Terry. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Can you give us a brief intro to your role and ministry transitions?
Yes, I'm really at the stage today of looking at what is a healthy succession strategy for organizations
Mhm.
and the kind of transitions that multiply and don't divide an organization. So this has been a continuous aspect of my focus professionally on people. The last 5 decades, it includes 30 years in executive search, where I was responsible probably for over 800 people in new positions, and our organization well over 1,000. So I really had a chance to analyze and really look at what is a good transition and a search, and what types of companies, what they have to deal with in order to make it work. So it's something that's my passion point and my mission.
We had great conversation in our intro call and just before we started taping, and I'm really excited to talk about this because I've seen this in my career. I've seen this over and over again. So I'm really interested in you sharing, the challenges that um, you faced in executive search with organizations and, how you navigated that with the organization. So let's start there. If I'm a CEO and I need a VP of marketing because my VP of marketing just left, I'm going to call you and I'm going to say, Ron, I need a VP of marketing right now.
And I'll say that's very nice. Good. Thanks for calling me. But could you be a little more specific? And so that would start the processing of really understanding the role, where, the background, the history. See, where many times is that, for example, you can't successfully lead a business by reacting. You have to plan, you have to have a strategy, you have to have a process. So I found realistically, when a CEO comes to me, they're looking for a body, they're looking for a person,
Hmm.
my question is, that's not the question. That's not what your priority is. You're looking for someone to come in and functionally perform a role, and the question is, do you know what that role should really look like? In other words, define the role
Hmm.
before you identify the person. And that means it gives you a lot more forethought, a lot more deeper level, because, for example, that VP of marketing may have been in that role for 5 years.
Hmm.
Well, where that role was when that VP of marketing started to where that role has evolved 5 years later is very significantly different. And in some cases, that VP of marketing, why did they leave? Maybe because they had fulfilled what they were capable of doing. The company had grown so much, they didn't have the skill set. And even though they didn't potentially know that, they didn't feel comfortable and therefore were susceptible to leaving. So it's digging a little bit deeper as to the why. Why are we in this position? Why is this role there? And then and the problem is that most CEOs and most businesses there really haven't fully embraced the value of people, and their culture has not defined it that way. So they don't really know their people well. They don't really know the depth of what they can bring and bring it to where they are today. That's why having having a professional like what you're offering, having a third party eyes on what they're going through is so critical, because we just don't know where we are in our growth cycle. So it's not a fault of the CEO not knowing this. They just never had any really good coaching.
Yeah. Can I just go there for a second? I have seen that so many times in my career and in my work with clients. There's such an urgent need that I need the position filled. I need the position filled. Well, we need that, right? And to your point, life has changed, the organization has changed, the needs have changed. But what you're asking me to do as a CEO is going to take me time, and time is money. So how
Well, but then, yeah, it is true, but that's where you come down to a strategy. And if you look in the last 5 years, the context that's now called a fractional role. You have fractional CFOs, you have fractional CMOs, you have fractional IT people. You
Mhm.
bring in an interim person to maintain what you have that then buys you the time to identify the appropriate person for where you want to go. Because you're not hiring for today, you're hiring for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
All right.
Mhm,
So you then have to think through, what is tomorrow going to look like?
mhm,
And so that takes time, but you could, there are stopgap measures in there. But back to your point about how this urgency thing, you know, I mean, if I can't have a healthy dialogue with a CEO on a role, I cannot serve them. It's the old adage: if there's not a relationship, they're not listening. How can you help guide them if they've already fixed what they want? It's almost like in relationships, going, "Oh, I want to find a wife." Okay, good. I'll go on a dating service and find the first one and hire him. How does that work out? That doesn't.
mhm.
It's no different relationally in an organization.
Yeah. So Ron, I I know the urgency is there, and I know that, it takes time to do this. How do you, in your experience, how have you convinced a CEO that this is worth the time? Because I could find somebody else. How do you do that?
Well, I primarily focus in on what the process looks like and what's the benefits of handling that process versus not. Um, and once again, there's two sides of this of the process here. One is the process of identifying the role that needs to be replaced and what functions, skill sets are needed and what type of personality. The other part is really coaching the hiring manager on how to go about securing that person.
Mhm,
In other words, what questions should they have? What questions should I be asking?
mhm.
What's important to me? Also, where the CEO is. Are you planning to leave yourself in the next year? Where is the status of the organization? I mean, is this something? If it's a family-run business, are you thinking 5 years to turn the business over to your oldest son? I mean, there's a lot of other dynamics that need to be taken into consideration other than just filling one particular role.
I
It's a team approach here.
It's a team approach. You just mentioned something else that maybe there's not enough thought given to, the whole succession piece, right? Because you hire someone today, you're not just hiring, as you said, you're not just hiring for that role. This is someone that hopefully can 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 continue to contribute in an organization over a period of time. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I always look at it like, and be able to ascend to other positions in the organization. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, let me give you an example that I think is an extreme example. There's an organization that deals in financial services,
Okay.
very successful, long history. The
Hmm.
current CEO is is getting to a point where they know they need to transition.
Okay.
Now, the problem that the board of directors has is this gentleman CEO. He's what the he does. He's 90%. He's a rainmaker. He brings in 90% of the business.
Hmm.
Yeah, go find a person who can walk in the door and bring in 90% of the business.
Hmm.
So from this example, this is with the board and the leadership, the outgoing CEO, I'd say, think back, okay, all right, we're going to have to rearrange the whole leadership team because I'll probably have to, my rainmaking skills is going to have to probably be replaced by three or four people.
Yes.
So that affects everyone else in the organization who had just been leaning on this guy bringing in the money, bringing the clients in, and we'll just go ahead and do the services. So
Mhm.
the implications of what a change can mean down the road is there. I mean, I have one understanding of many of the major corporations today. When they hire a new CEO, the board, one of the first things the board tells the CEO, by the end of your first year, I want a succession plan for the organization.
Smart planning. Smart.
Because if in like statistics show that in an organization, a little larger organization, we have a strong, maybe the CEO has 6 or 7 direct reports, for example,
Mhm.
that within the first year, 80% of those direct reports will change with a new CEO.
Yes.
And in 2 years, the next level will be about 60% will change. And
Mhm.
that's more due to the culture. That's why if you have a succession plan strategy, you may be able to actually develop someone internally that you could grow into that CEO role and maintain the consistency of the organization and not have it be so disruptive.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the things I recently shared with a client is, and this relates directly to the rainmaker. Be realistic about what you're expecting for this new person to do, because nobody's going to be able to do what that rainmaker did. Like you said, might take 3 or 4 people, but unless you pull back and really understand, to your point, what you need to consider and what you need, it's very easy to think, well, we're going to hire somebody who can do exactly what this person did. And that's probably unrealistic. The second point there is that the right thing for an organization to allow itself to develop a person and a function where everything relies on that person? So when that person leaves, things start to fall apart.
No, it no, those are extremely valid points. But that to me is part of the, you know what, I know your heart's on this. This is the understanding of the process. You gotta take the time to go into the process if you want to create something sustain and have longevity. If not, it's going to fall apart. It's a difference of it really, if you take a step back and you look at it really from a higher level, it comes down to relationships. How important, I mean, if this rainmaker example I gave, he has that still because he has relationships with the vendors.
Yes.
So bringing someone in who doesn't have those existing relationships, and with your, vendors, with your clients, with your staff, so that takes time to build up. In other words, you can, in a relationship building, you can't just come in there as someone, and we all have examples of that, of seeing someone come into a new role, VP role of operation, and they come in like, oh, like a blockbuster. They just ram right in. And what they've forgotten is that new person coming into an environment has to earn the right to be heard.
Mhm.
In other words, I don't care if they report to you. I don't know who you are, so I'm going to hold back. So
Absolutely.
relationship building is about investing the time to get to know the people to gain permission
Mhm.
to share and be and have people see who you are. I
Y
mean,
you
I relocated in myself, my wife and I, about 9 years ago to a new community where I arrived as a nobody, and I came from a community where I thought I was somebody.
Mhm.
And I literally, as much as I had to offer, it took me a good year just
Wow.
from a living standpoint to be accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I mean, that's such a great point, and I think it sounds like that is work that you do with your clients as you take on these executive recruiting roles. Because being realistic about knowing what you want, being realistic about the person you bring in and how you integrate them into the organization, I think is so critical.
Mhm.
Um, Several points that you made there we could go to. So one of the things that I want to make sure we hit is when we had our intro call, you talked about positioning the organization. What does that look like, and what does that mean?
Well, I mean, it has many different levels. One, it's once hopefully an organization knows how they're positioned in their respective industry.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, of course, today, one of the big things today is taking advantage of what's going on and also how to respond to what's going on. And, the whole concept of AI.
Mhm.
And, what does that mean? So you have to be attuned to where you are in your industry. And every industry has trends. So if you're looking at the bigger picture, it's and also knowing who else is in your industry. So you got to know that. That's a basic, if you're working with a product that doesn't have a life more than 2 years, guess what? You're going to be out. You could either have to reinvent it yourself or go out of business. Well, I mean, Apple is the greatest example of keep reinventing themselves and building and growing. Um, so I think that me is position your business, but also look around your staff. I mean, I was dealing with an organization that all their senior team members were in their 60s.
Mm.
I mean, that's the people side. I mean, guess what? They're not going to be there 10 years from now.
Mhm.
So you got to look at your people, but also look at the type of talent. this is where, to me, this really all comes back. Organizational positioning to me is culture.
Yes.
Have you really identified what your culture is all about? I mean, I heard about an organization here, a restaurant organization, that on the surface, oh, owner, great guy, wonderful. But behind the scenes, he just didn't treat his people well.
My gosh, yes.
And it's like it's what's in the inside that's really important. Like we all know in life, it's you can look good, you can use social media to be good, but if your motive is not good,
Mhm,
not caring about other people,
mhm,
it's not there. But once again, you have to do your homework. Nothing happens quickly. I don't think there's a successful business owner today or CEO who doesn't realize he didn't get there the first day. It took a lot of hard work.
mhm.
And so even though you get to a certain level, the hard work doesn't stop. But that's once again, I really believe that a lot of small business, mid-sized businesses is they fail because they're small-minded leaders. They haven't brought in resources to help them, educate them, and gain experience to what's going on in the market. Because you just one person or two people cannot grasp all that on their own. They
Mm.
need help, and it's not a Google search; it's an actual, bring a coach. I mean, I don't know necessarily any really successful business today that the senior executive teams don't have coaches.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's much more mainstream now, and it's becoming a business staple, not a luxury. I wanna go back to what you said, because I've experienced this so much in my career and working with clients. You hire a high potential person who's delivered in so many different ways, looks good, he or she can do this for the business, but you don't spend enough time looking at how they accomplish that. And so coming back to your culture, if you are bringing in people that don't support your culture, don't enhance your culture, in fact, start chipping away at your culture, there is a price you're going to pay for that.
Well, yeah, there's no doubt about it. Another aspect that I observed is, and this is getting to know, and I used to do this a lot, my search practice. I mean, I do it all the time, but it's critical, is getting to really know the people, know their heart. What motivates them? I mean, the number of people that I ran into in my search practice that probably late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, and they've been just trying to strive. They thought the curve of your life, that life is goes like this. You and they get to the top, they climb this ladder of success, and they get to the top and they realize the ladder is leaning against the wrong building. In other words, their motivation for what they were doing was wrong. And then they look back on the ladder, their marriage is in shambles. The kids don't know who they are
That's right.
because they didn't really have good clarity as to what's really important. And I think that's a key component of creating a culture. Do you know your people well enough?
Mhm,
Or are you driven so much by, like even comes back to the basic question, Terry,
mhm,
define success. you
mhm,
know, what is success?
mhm.
When you say someone's a successful person, what are you defining them to be? And so if someone's interviewing, that's the other thing of coaching the hiring manager on these roles is what questions should I be asking the candidates?
Yes.
Really to get to understand their motivation and get to know really what, why they're here, what they're, and, uh, and I used to have a lot of fun with that because I would recommend asking some really obtuse questions.
Mhm,
Not, because everyone can practice interviewing and doing the basic ones. I,
mhm.
I, I would actually sit there and goes, well, what do you think about those Yankees this year?
Yeah,
Wow. You know, but to get them out of track, because I wanted to find out the real you and what that might be.
yeah. It's interesting, Ron, because I remember I had an interview with a company that I stayed with for 11 years, and, I had to go to their headquarters to interview, and I remember walking out of one of the interviews with a senior executive. I'm like, "That was the weirdest experience," because he was asking a lot of those questions that you're talking about, and I'm thinking, "What does that have to do with anything?" But he was getting to know me, and I'm like, At that point, I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. But looking back, I'm like, I appreciate that because he wanted to get to know me and what was important to me. And he knew the organization and he wanted to be able to give, I don't know, the hiring committee feedback on not just her skills and her knowledge, but who she is, because who she is what's going to show up at work every day, right? In addition to the skills and the knowledge. And so I learned to appreciate that. So I really thank you for bringing that up because I think that's a piece that could get missed and undervalued.
Well, I mean, how many times did, in a key role, if I was the hiring manager, make sure you get your wife and you take this candidate out with their spouse. You can learn so much about someone when you see who they married and
Ooh,
see how they treat each other and how they interact. I
that is
mean,
so
so
true.
this is important. It's a critical relationship. You can't blow it. This is not like, well, it didn't work out. We'll get another one next week. No, this is a real human being. This is a critical role in your organization. So treat it that way.
So question, you can't do that with every role. And I know we've been, talking about I introduced, VP of marketing, but you can't do that with every level in the organization. But I'm sure I'm not sure, I'm certain to take this kind of care and attention, you need to do that throughout the organization and not just at a certain level. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's critically important, but and I think today more than ever there are some excellent assessments that can be can be given to people and organizations. Well-run organizations as they're hiring always have people take assessments today.
Mhm.
And there's a multitude. I mean, in our platform, our ministry transitions, we've used 6 different assessments
Wow. Okay.
when we evaluate people,
Mhm.
evaluate leaders, and right down to the emotional side. I mean, this one assessment, there was a leader who really had a problem with one of the key female employees, and he didn't understand what the problem was. So we did the assessments, and
Mhm.
it turned out that this is through our job benchmarking. It turned out his skill set for every one of the roles was great, but he had one line where he had low scores on social engagement.
Okay.
In other words, he was not good at discerning and reading people.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
I mean, in this particular situation, he was a very gregarious, friendly, huggy type person. And, most people, but
I know where that can go.
this particular woman leader, uh, if you looked at her, you would not hug her. So,
Mhm,
she had her walls up,
mhm,
but he crossed that barrier and caused some, problem, became an HR incident.
mhm.
So, I mean, do you know your people? Do you know, that's what I say back, do you know yourself? And assessments are a really good tool. But once again, assessments are fine, but you have to know how to interpret them.
Absolutely.
I
And
mean, it's like Strength Finders, the big thing. I like to say Strength Finders is wonderful. Let's have a glass of wine, talk about which you are.
and it's information. It never takes the place of conversation and understanding.
It's
It's
a guy.
very quick. It's very quick to label people, and labeling to me limits. We should look at these as information and how do we learn more. So in that case that you just gave, what's interesting, if that was if the company was aware of that up front, not sure how that's going to show up in the organizations, but in the organization, but so many times it shows up in the way that you just said, and then it becomes an issue, and it's an issue that quite honestly gets dumped on HR to deal with when we had opportunities up front to be aware and to be watchful and to be supportive and
Well,
adjusted.
coach a person. That's the whole
Yeah,
point. If
yeah.
this is something you found that not to be one of your strengths,
Mhm,
that you need to be aware of that. I mean, I know, for example, I am not good with. I mean, and people might say, "Well, it's impossible. You remember so much." I'm not good at details. I get the big picture. I'm on a flow. I have no interest in the details. But if
mhm.
I had a coworker who was into the details, we'd make one hell of a team. So
Yeah,
the idea of knowing where you are and how you can best do it is important. And leadership needs to know that of their teammates. even if it's emotional. Sometimes uh, there are people who talk too much. You know,
Yes.
there's well, all these different issues, but this is just part of life, and that's part of building people together and creating a culture. But it's what your end game is. What do you really? Where do you? I mean, it's like someone said to me, strategy and growth. I said, well, first, 5 years from now, where would you like to be as a business? Okay. Now, what level of expertise will you need in leadership on your team to be able to support that?
Mhm.
Okay. Now work back to today. You just now created a tunnel for succession in your
Absolutely.
organization because you got to build up to these people, the people side to match the organizational growth.
Mhm.
It's not rocket science, but it's just something to take the time to think about.
And
But
I
we're so much in the now. We just want it now, 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 now. That,
agree.
that
And I
tomorrow
agree.
still comes.
Yeah, I don't think it's not rocket science, but it's slowing down. It's having the thought process and the conversation, and the foresight to think about we're not just hiring for today. We're hiring for maybe our immediate needs today, but this is a person that we need to have in the organization for a period of time. And what that should start is something beyond just that person. It's like, wow, we haven't really looked at this in our organization. Okay, we're doing it now for this position, but we need to think about this for our other positions, for our organization all over. And that's really why I wanted to have this conversation because when you said when we had our intro call about positioning the organization, I don't think many companies understand what that means. And I wanted to really delve into that. And I think you've done an amazing job of sharing what your experience has been in working with an organization to identify the talent that they say they need, but even going deeper, which I think is amazing. So, as we end this conversation, and we know that everyone wants to walk away with, "What should I be thinking about?" What would you like to share?
I think first and foremost that the adage, people are your number one priority, and you need to treat them as such. And you got to treat them as such and get to know them, hear them, listen to them. That's first and foremost. And second most, you need to have a strategy. You need to have an organizational strategy, knowing where you're going to go so you know how to attract the right talent to fill the roles to allow for your success and growth.
Yeah. And you need the right partner to help you do that
Hmm.
because you're probably not if you're not doing it, you need someone to help you walk alongside you to help you do that.
Right. And that's what the role that I'm in today, our organization, that's 100% of what we're all about,
Mhm. Okay.
guiding it through, even helping the people that are after they leave a position.
Mhm.
'Cause a lot of times the elephant in the room in leadership transition is a person knows they should leave or knows they fulfilled it, but they don't know what to do next. So they'll stay too long. And we can talk another half hour on those stories of
Good.
who stayed in roles too long. And as such, damage so many the business, but so many people's lives because they did that.
Yeah, and Rod, on that note, I just wanna say I literally just had a 3-hour conversation with someone the other day about that very thing, and I remember one of the things I said to that person was, "You're not where you need to be. You're contributing what you need to contribute for the business, that's great, but for you personally, you're not where you need to be, and it's a process you have to go through to get where you need to be, but you need to get there." And I think that was so important because I think when things don't fit the way they used to, that means you're in transition. The question is what is that transition? And do you fight it or do you embrace it and go where it's taking you? Because when you're in a business, you want to bring your best all the time. And to your point earlier, knowing your people, knowing what motivates them, is really important for them to bring their best. And so it's not just about bringing the right people in. It's once they're in, there's a whole other body of work that needs to be done.
So there's one little litmus test, we'll make it real quick, that I always share,
Mhm.
is that when you engage in a new role, a new position, usually you're very passionate about it. You can't get up in the morning, you can't wait to get engaged in doing it. If you get to a point where you don't really want to get out of bed in the morning to go into that role, that your assignment is over. So you need to start opening yourself up to what the why is on that, and either work with the organization to transition yourself into a new role or maybe open yourself up to other roles.
I have really enjoyed this, and every conversation I've had with you, I've enjoyed. So we're going to wrap this up, and again, I want to thank you for your time and your insights. And we all know that performance is not accidental; it is built into your operating system. This is Terry Wilson with Operating Discipline. Please follow up with the next conversation with another CEO and senior leader.